So, did you do some meditation practice this morning? No? Yes? No? Out to lunch? Okay. It's really important not only to listen to teachings, but also to contemplate them and to meditate on them. Because we talk about three kinds of wisdom: the wisdom of hearing, thinking, and meditating. So when you hear the teachings or when you study, you get a certain amount of information and a certain kind of wisdom arises, but it's, more intellectual because you're just getting familiar with the terminology and the vocabulary, and somebody else is kind of guiding you along. But then it's important that you go home and think about what you heard and test it out and see, does it make sense logically? Yeah? Is it really true? And Buddha really encouraged that, not just to accept things because he said them, but really test them and logically, yeah. And then also through our own experience by meditating on them and really applying the teachings to our own experience. And so that way is how we really get the full benefit of listening to teachings. Yeah? So don't cheat yourself by just doing the learning part, but go on to the reflecting and the meditating part too. Okay? And it's very good when you wake up in the morning to set your motivation, because that will influence how the rest of the day goes for you. So, at the beginning of the day, before you even get out of bed, to think, today, as much as possible, I will not harm any other living being. I mean, that's really the bottom line. Yeah? Bottom line is not to harm. And then second, today as much as possible, I will benefit others. Yeah? And then third, today as much as possible, I will remember my altruistic intention to work for the benefit of sentient beings and to attain Buddhahood in order to do that. Okay? So even before you get out of bed, you can generate your motivation, and it really influences how the rest of the day goes for you. So what I recommend is that you write these three things down, okay? To not harm, to benefit, and to remember your altruistic intention to benefit all beings and become a Buddha. And then write them down, keep them by your bedside. Yeah, so in the morning when you wake up, you remember to set your motivation first thing like that. Yeah. Put them on the bathroom mirror. Yeah. So instead of looking, oh, how beautiful I am, you look and you remember your motivation.
What's the third one?
The first one, third one, to remember and increase your altruistic intention. Your motivation of love and compassion to work for the benefit of all beings and to become a Buddha so that you can act in the most beneficial way. So it's very nice, like I said, put it on your bedside, put it on the bathroom mirror, put it on the kitchen, the refrigerator door, put it on your steering wheel. Yeah? Because remembering your motivation is very, very important, put it on your screensaver. When you open your phone, have that be the first thing that you see, so that you keep remembering it and keep setting your intention again and again and again. Yeah, quite important. Okay? So yesterday we talked about our precious human life with its 18 conditions, and how when we contemplate those conditions and see that we have such a perfect opportunity to practice, that we should be really delighted about it and really appreciative of our fortune, because whoever we were in a previous life worked very hard to create all the causes for our present rebirth. And so it's important that we use our present rebirth wisely now, and don't throw away the efforts of whoever we were in a previous life that worked so hard to get this rebirth. So when they talk about the meaning and purpose of a precious human rebirth, they often talk about it in terms of three things that we can use it for. So the first one is to create the causes for a better rebirth in the future, which we talked about yesterday, and the 16 causes that Nagarjuna spoke of for attaining a fortunate rebirth. So that's one of the ways we can use our life. The second way is to use our life to attain liberation or full awakening. And so that's going to be our ultimate purpose, our ultimate aim. Yeah. So when we think about liberation or full awakening, they may seem very far away, but we have that potential, like we talked about yesterday, that the Buddha, we once hung out with the Buddha at the beach and in the disco, and he went on to attain enlightenment, and we kept lying on the beach. Okay, but we have the same potential. We have the same basic clear light nature of mind, the same Buddha nature as all the Buddhas, and so we should try and attain full awakening. And then third is we can use our life moment by moment to create virtue. And so this involves a lot of what we call in the Tibetan tradition the thought training practices. In other words, ways of bringing the Dharma into our daily life. So one example of that is offering our food. Like yesterday, we offered the food before we ate. Yeah, so get in the habit of offering your food, especially most of you have Buddhist families. And so it's a nice activity to do together with your family, and a nice thing to teach your kids. Yeah. Other ways are like when you're cleaning, to think I'm cleaning the defilements from the minds of sentient beings. Yeah. So instead of just, I'm getting rid of all this dirt here, you remember a spiritual motivation. I'm cleaning the defilements of sentient beings. When you walk upstairs, you think I'm leading sentient beings to awakening. When you walk downstairs, you think, may I be willing to go even to the lower realms in order to benefit the sentient beings there. Okay? So all these ways of really bringing a Dharma way of thinking into our life. Also, it's very good, to have a shrine in your home and an altar and to make offerings. So the Buddha does not need our offerings. If you're fully awakened, you don't need apples and oranges and flowers to make you happy. But we make the offerings because it's good for our mind. It develops the delight in giving in our mind, and that factor of generosity is very important for our own spiritual development. Okay? So having an altar and making offerings every morning is very, very nice. If you have young children, it's an excellent way to bring the kids into the Dharma. Teach them how to bow, and then have them make the offerings. And I had one friend, I stayed at her house, who did that. And her little girl must have been maybe 4 or 5 years old at the time. And so every day the little girl gave the Buddha a present, and the Buddha also gave her a present. So it was very sweet. This little girl grew up with a very fond feeling for the Buddha. So it's a nice thing to do. So today, I'm going to continue reading from His Holiness's book. Okay, so now he's talking about taking the essence of our precious human life. Okay. So I think I told you, when I was young, I always wondered, what's the purpose of my life? Why am I alive? What happens after I die? And how relieved I was to hear Buddhist teachers talk about this in a very direct way. Yeah, and so, really, how do we live a meaningful life? It's an important question, isn't it? Yeah, because if we don't think about it, then we just go through our life grabbing happiness here, grabbing happiness there, pushing away suffering and criticism there, pushing away, blame and unhappiness there. But we never really grow inside. At the end of our life, what do we have for being alive? All we have is a digital device with a lot of pictures on it. Yeah? Meanwhile, our consciousness, our mind goes off into another life. Our body stays here and either gets burned or becomes the worm's lunch. And then there's this, cell phone with pictures on it. Yeah. And I think that our lives are more valuable than that. Yeah. And not that we have to leave behind a ton of money, because, money comes and goes. And anyway, if you leave a lot of money to your kids, then they're all going to fight over it. Yeah. It sounds funny. It sounds strange. But I watched with my parents' friends, and that's what happened to a lot of them. The kids fought over the money. And then I thought, this would never happen in my family. And then when my parents died, it was the way they set up the will. It was a whole thing. It was a setup for conflict between the kids. Really sad, So as parents, you don't want to, work so hard to get a lot of money and then your kids fight over it. Yeah. Better you use the money to do something good in the world so that you accumulate merit, because the merit will come with you to the next life. Yeah. The book I was reading from yesterday, when we were talking about the 16 causes for precious human life, practical ethics and profound emptiness. So in it, Nagarjuna is talking to the king. And in a later chapter than the one I read from yesterday, he says to the king, you have this whole storehouse of wealth, and use it now to create merit, because when you get old and you're dying, all your ministers are going to be plotting on how to get it, and all their attention is going to go towards the new king and pleasing that new king. Yeah? And so you're going to have to leave all this stuff behind anyway when you go on to the next life. So don't, leave it to others who are going to use it for their own greedy purposes. But he instructed the king, set up schools, set up clinics, set up infrastructure. It's amazing in this book, he goes into a huge discussion of how a ruler should rule the kingdom in a just and fair way, and the ruler's obligation to benefit the citizens in it. It's beautiful, because Nagarjuna is really teaching this is how you become a leader in a Buddhist society. I wanted to send it to President Trump. Because he needs some good advice. Right now, his advisors are giving him very bad advice. But it's really beautiful, use the resources, use your power, use your ability to be of great benefit to sentient beings, to alleviate poverty, alleviate suffering, bring about harmony. Okay? So we can do that with our precious human life. And when we do that, then when we look back on our life at the time of death, we feel a lot of happiness. Because we lived our life in an ethical way, in a kind way, we were able to benefit others. Now, there's a new book out called The Book of Joy, and I haven't read it, but one of the nuns at our Abbey read it, and she told us about it. And it's a series of conversations between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Bishop Tutu. And they said that it's just a spectacular book, because here are two, world-renowned leaders for their compassion and for their advocacy for human rights. And they're both old now. But they're having a conversation about life and everything, and they see things very similarly. They have a lot of laughter. There's a real feeling of friendship and also meaning and purpose in their lives. And so I don't think either one of them are going to die rich. And in any case, you can't take your wealth with you. I don't care how much paper money they burn for you from the bank of hell. That's not going to help you in your next life. I must say, I find it very strange. When people's relatives die, they assume they're going to hell. So they get money from the bank of hell and burn it to send to hell for their relatives in hell. Why do they think their relatives are going to hell? If they were good relatives, they would teach their relatives to be generous, to have good ethical conduct. Then they would think, oh, my relatives are going to a good rebirth. Then I would burn some ringgit. But nobody burns their ringgit, do they? Never, Monopoly money, bank of hell, yes. But our own money, no. Okay, But the idea is to use our money to be generous and to encourage our relatives to keep good ethical conduct and be generous and to forgive others. And so on, that helps them quite a bit. Okay, so His Holiness says, Knowing the great value of our precious human life is crucial to this and future lives. Unaware of the value of our precious human life, we will not see our lives as significant and filled with opportunity, and risk wasting the chance to create the causes of happiness for a long time to come. Instead, we will mindlessly follow our self-centered thoughts, which will lead us to unfortunate rebirths. But once aware of the rarity of a precious human life, the difficulty of attaining it, and the amazing things we can do with it, we will no longer think our lives are meaningless. Okay? So if we really see the purpose of our life and the good that we can do from it, then there's no room for depression, there's no room for boredom, and we will work diligently to overcome our self-centered thoughts because we realize that they impede us on our spiritual path. Okay? All living beings seek happiness and peace, and I believe attaining this is the purpose of human life. Happiness and peace depend on hope. People lose hope when their lives do not go smoothly or they fail to actualize their expectations. Some people become depressed, and some look to suicide for relief, which doesn't stop the pain. But when we understand that creating the causes for peace and happiness are within our ability, despondency cannot take root. Okay? So what fuels depression and despondency? And here I'm not talking about clinical depression that comes because of a chemical imbalance in the brain. I'm not talking about that kind of depression. I'm talking about the depression where we just feel despondent and hopeless, okay? It comes because maybe we had unrealistic aims and we weren't able to fulfill them, and we don't see the meaning and purpose of our life. And so then our self-centeredness grows and becomes very strong, and we fall into self-pity. Poor me, my life is a mess. I got married with so much hope, and my spouse got sick and died, or they turned out not to be so good. I had kids with so much hope, and my kids are all rebellious. I worked hard at my profession, but I didn't make enough money. Woe is me. I'm hopeless. I'm helpless. Nobody loves me. Everybody hates me. My life is a mess. And then we sit there and feel sorry for ourselves. We take our blankie and suck our thumb. Huh? Huh? Don't we? Huh? And what good does it do us? What good comes from falling into self-pity and feeling that our life is the most pitiful one in the world? You know, forget the people starving in Somalia. Forget the people who live in a war zone in Syria. Forget the people who are impoverished in our own country. My life has more suffering than anybody else's. It's a little bit self-preoccupied, don't you think? Yeah? If I can't be the best, well, I'm going to be the worst. And we make ourselves so unhappy by the way we think. Yeah, it's not the external situation that is the problem. It's how we respond to that situation. It's how we interpret it. It's how we think about it. That's where the problem lies, not in the external situation. Okay. Why? Because I've talked to people, for example, who were imprisoned in China during the Cultural Revolution or imprisoned in Tibet when the Beijing government occupied Tibet. People who were imprisoned, people who were tortured. Some people in those situations, they gave up hope and they died. But I've met people who did not give up hope, who did not succumb to self-pity in those situations, and instead made their lives very meaningful. I met one monk, and the communists imprisoned him in his own house. They turned his house into a prison, his family house. He was imprisoned there. Yeah. He couldn't even have prayer beads to use. He couldn't have anything. But while he was imprisoned there, he did retreat. Because people who imprison you cannot corrupt your mind. Yeah, they can do whatever they want to your body, but they cannot make your mind unhappy or corrupt your mind and make it become non-virtuous. And so he had a very strong mind. So the time of his imprisonment, he did retreat. Yeah. I met some nuns when I was in China, and they told me that their nunnery was turned into a factory, a communist factory, and they were humiliated, because you know how the communists humiliated the religious people. They had to wear placards and walk through the street with dunce caps and placards saying, we were, kind of stupid Buddhists and, contrary to the motherland or whatever. And they had to do that and then work in the factory that was their temple. And then years later, when all of that was over, they came out of it, they reestablished their nunnery, they were cheerful human beings. Yeah? So you see, if we think in a proper way, we can overcome anything. But if we don't think in the proper way, even the smallest problem becomes insurmountable to our mind. Yeah. It just depends on how we think. And this is the beauty about the Buddha's message. Yeah. Because the Buddha said we can practice the Dharma anywhere, everywhere, in all situations, and make our lives meaningful. Yeah. And it depends on us. It's our choice. Okay? So this is what is being got at here. Okay? And if you really feel the meaning of your life, then you see that you can transform even horrible situations into the Dharma path. Yeah. There are two types of happiness, temporary and long-lasting. Experienced while we are in cyclic existence, temporary happiness includes the attainment of a higher rebirth as a human being or God. Long-lasting happiness is liberation and awakening, which are attained through spiritual practice. The way to make our life meaningful and to attain these two kinds of happiness is by engaging in sincere spiritual practice. Okay? And so to develop renunciation, to develop compassion, to develop the wisdom-knowing reality. Okay? If we have learned the Dharma and are skillful, no matter our situation in life, where we are, or what time it is, the potential to enrich ourselves through Dharma practice is always present. Last night, I read a letter by one of the inmates I correspond with. And I was so moved by this letter. He's got to be in his 40s now. He was imprisoned, I think, when he was 19 for assault and some kind of involvement in, I don't know the exact situation, but some kind of assault and then murder charge. And so he's been imprisoned for a long time. And he wrote and he said, you know, most of my adult life I've been sitting on a bunk in prison. So I can't tell you much about what I've done in my adult life externally because I haven't done much. I've been sitting on this bunk. But internally, I've done a lot. And so then in the letter, he described how one time he saw a piece of art and it showed our globe that was destroyed by pollution or warfare or whatever, and it had cracked open. Our earth had cracked open and was destroyed. But out of that cracked open earth in the art, another earth was arising that was very beautiful. And he said when he saw that painting, it made him reflect on his own life. Because until then, his life had been kind of like the cracked, open, shattered life. Yeah, he had grown up in the intercity. There was a lot of violence in his neighborhood. Yeah, he did not have a good surrounding growing up. But he said he realized when looking at that painting that he had a choice. He could continue to be that cracked open, wasted earth, or he could be the new earth that was rising from it. And he decided at that moment he was going to be that new earth rising from it. And he said he didn't have an idea of exactly what it would look like at that time. He didn't know the Dharma at that time. So he didn't know exactly what he would do or what would happen, but he made a determination to revitalize his life and renew his life. And he said it started with looking at the decisions he made and the choices he made. So he started with something easy, the kind of music he listens to. Yeah, my guess is he was probably listening to hardcore punk rock, you know, or rap music that was expressing violence or misogyny. He stopped listening to that kind of music. Then he looked at his choices for entertainment. What did he watch on TV? And he started making different choices. Give up the violent shows, give up the shows with a lot of sex. Okay. Then he started looking at, what else did he say? Who his friends were. Yeah, he started just looking at what he did, who he chose as friends, and what were the qualities of the people that he chose to be around. And he started changing that. And so slowly, he started scrutinizing every aspect of his life and the choices he made in every aspect, to really see if his choices were leading him in a good direction. Yeah. I just read this last night. I was so moved by what he wrote, and now he's coming to understand the Dharma. I don't think he would call himself a Buddhist yet, okay? But he started writing to me, and we discuss a lot of different issues in our letters, And so slowly, I think the Buddhist perspective is coming into his life, and he's continuing to look at his life very closely. Yeah. So I really admire that. Yeah. Because he's not just living on automatic, doing what everybody thinks you should do. Yeah. But so much of us who are outside prison, we just live our lives on automatic. We don't think about the choices we make. Is this choice going to lead me to virtue or non-virtue? Is this choice going to help me cultivate compassion or help me cultivate anger or jealousy? Yeah. And so to really start looking at our choices, because that's going to influence the karma we create, the kind of rebirths we have in the future, and how soon we attain liberation and awakening. Okay? So to live a very conscious life. Not just, well, everybody's going out to the movies on Saturday night, I go too. Oh, everybody else is having some wine, I'll have some too. Oh, everybody else is involved in this shady business deal, I'll just do it too. Yeah? So not that kind of life. Spiritual practice involves some form of renunciation. Misidentifying what to renounce, some people think they must give up happiness and undergo hardship and suffering by accepting extra problems and miseries that they did not have before. If this were so, no sensible person would want to practice the Dharma. Okay? The Buddha does not direct us towards suffering. Rather, he shows us the path to be free of misery. He does this by explaining the roots of suffering, ignorance, anger, and attachment. And those are the things to be renounced. Ignorance, anger, and attachment. That's what we renounce. Okay? And the Buddha explains the causes of suffering, generosity, fortitude, compassion, and so on, which are to be adopted. He teaches a gradual path so that we can practice according to our capability at any particular moment. So this is important because we're all at different levels. We all have different capabilities. So it's not very good to compare ourselves to our Dharma friends. Yeah, we need to be really practical and see what we're capable of and practice that. Yeah, and to start where we're at, yeah, and to build a good, solid Dharma foundation. If we do that, then we can slowly, learn the more difficult practices and the higher practices. And we'll be successful in doing that because we'll have a good foundation. It's like when you rebuilt your center here, you had to have a firm foundation on the ground floor before you built this floor. Yeah? You can't build the walls before you have the foundation. You can't put the roof on before you have the foundation. So we start where we're at. We practice what we're capable of. And then we slowly progress in a really wonderful way. Yeah. And really don't compare yourself to anybody else. Yeah, because we're all unique, we're all different. Yeah. And getting jealous of your Dharma friends is horrible. It's, can you imagine what the Buddha would say if he walked into a Dharma center where all the people are competing with each other and jealous of each other? What would the Buddha say? Yeah, he'd probably go, ah, and run away. Yeah, because as the Buddha's followers, it's so important that we cooperate and we work together with each other. Yeah? And differences of opinion occur. That's very natural with sentient beings. Of course, we have different opinions. Yeah? Even within ourselves, we have confusion. We can't decide on what we believe. So, of course, we're going to have different opinions. But that doesn't mean we need to fight and quarrel. And it doesn't mean we need to compete. And so, that pertains within families, within Buddhist centers, also with other Dharma centers. Yeah, we shouldn't compete with other Dharma centers or other Buddhist traditions. Yeah. Oh, our center is bigger. We have more people. Yeah. No, we're all Buddhists. We all help each other. We all encourage each other. We all foster each other's virtue. Yeah. It's very important. So by teaching a gradual practice, the Buddha instructed his followers so that they embrace a way of life in which they eliminate all suffering and its causes step by step, beginning with the gross ones and proceeding to the subtle ones. In addition, they cultivate happiness, starting with temporary happiness and progressing up to the ultimate happiness of Buddhahood. Okay, so in our Dharma practice, what it's good to start on is whichever affliction is the one that causes you the most trouble in your life. Okay, so often we have ignorance, anger, attachment. Then we also add to those arrogance and jealousy. All 5 of them are pretty nasty, okay? And all of us have all of those 5. But it's good to look inside and say, which one is the worst one for me? Yeah? Is greed and attachment and unrealistic expectations, is that the worst one for me? Or is it my temper? Or is it ignorance? Or is it my competitive, jealous mind? Or is it arrogance? And so whichever affliction is the most prominent in our mind, to really work diligently, at the beginning of our practice and subsequently too, to overcome that affliction, or at least to subdue it a little bit. Okay? So it's important to do this, because if you have a bad temper and you come to Buddhism and you say, oh, I want to practice the Dharma, but I have a bad temper and there's nothing to do about it. I've always had a bad temper. And the people I live with just have to get used to it. If we have a bad temper, and that's the thing that causes us so many difficulties in our life, then that's the thing we need to really work hard on at the beginning. Yeah, is getting a handle on our temper. Yeah, because if we don't, we're like a walking atom bomb, aren't we? You know, some people, you don't know what to expect from them. You say hello, and all of a sudden, whoa, what did you say hello to me like that? You know, you're always disrespecting me. I just said hello, you know, calm down. Okay? Some people, you know, their worst thing is greed and attachment. You know, sticky. I want this and I want this, and I need you to be close to me, and I need you to support me, and I need you to be loyal to me, and then I also want this and that and the other thing, and some more money wouldn't do, and I'm like grabbing at everything. Yeah. If that's our biggest problem, then again, we need to work on that. Yeah. Because then if we have a lot of attachment, we don't see other human beings as people. We just see them in terms of how we can use them to benefit ourselves. Yeah. And then we become so greedy. We're always, you know, everywhere you look like, how can I get that? I like those curtains. Those curtains are really good. Look, they match my robes. I wonder how I can get them to give me those curtains, you know? And everywhere you look, it's with a mind that is craving, okay? Yeah. So they're really nice, aren't they? They're velvet. Yeah, velvet curtains, really nice. Maroon color, can't beat that. Huh? Gimme, 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 gimme. You know? So that's not going to work. Yeah. Or some people, arrogance is their big problem. Yeah. Everybody they meet, they have their nose in the air, you know. I'm so good. I'm so perfect. Here is my card. And no longer do you have a small card like this, because you have so many titles that you have to have a card that is like an accordion that opens up. So you can fit in, you know, vice president of this, president of that, associate director of this, director of that, champion of this, recipient of this award, that award. Please, aren't you proud to know somebody like me? Look at all my qualifications. Okay, if we're like that, then, you know, how are other people going to react to us? Okay, so with all these things, to really look, you know, which one's our biggest problem, and then work on that one. Okay. From this, we see that the purpose of spiritual practice is to bring a sense of internal peace, well-being, and fulfillment. That's what we all want, isn't it? Peace, well-being, fulfillment. Internal. Internal. You can have a lot of external things and feel impoverished inside. You can look good to the whole world and feel crummy about yourself. Yeah. So the real happiness comes from what's going on in here. It's not from having a lot of stuff and a lot of accolades and praise and reputation from other people. Yeah? Because the whole world can tell us how wonderful we are, but if we don't feel good about ourselves, then it doesn't matter. Yeah? So internal peace through ethical conduct, through generosity, through fortitude. You know, this is, I think, what we all want. Although our ultimate goal is full awakening, the most urgent and immediate happiness to work for is that of future lives. And for that reason, practitioners endeavor to create the causes and conditions to have a precious human life and abandon causes that create the contrary. Although we have such a potential, we often fail to recognize it, or even if we do, we are often distracted and do not utilize our potential. Our tendency to pay more attention to gaining immediate happiness and avoiding unpleasant situations is often stronger than a clear awareness that sees the value of creating the causes for fortunate rebirth, liberation, and awakening. Our chief obstacles at present are subsumed in the 8 worldly concerns. 4 pairs of delight and dejection that produce attachment and anger. Okay? So the 8 worldly concerns was one of the things you asked me to speak about this weekend. So here it goes. Okay? So we're starting off with a quote from the numerical discourses in the Pali Canon. So the Buddha said, gain and loss, disrepute and fame, blame and praise, pleasure and pain. These 8 worldly concerns revolve around the world, and the world revolves around these 8 worldly concerns. Okay? So we have 4 pairs here. Gain and loss of material things. Disrepute and fame, so that concerns our reputation. Praise and blame, so that's what other people say directly to us. And pleasure and pain, our sensual sensations. Yeah. So attachment arises towards one part of each of these pairs, okay? Material or financial gain, good reputation or image, praise and approval, and pleasure, especially from sight, sound, smells, taste, and tactile sensations. An aversion arises towards the other part of each pair, lack of money and possessions, a notorious reputation, blame and criticism, and discomfort or pain. Okay. Illustrations of these 8 abound in our daily lives. We try to arrange our lives to come in contact with attractive objects and people, tantalizing sense experiences, sweet, ego-pleasing words, money, possessions, and so forth. We complain when these do not meet our standard or when we encounter their opposite. Being preoccupied with these 8, which center on our own happiness only in this life, we become very reactive to our environment and the people in it. This emotional reactivity, clinging to what we like, pushing away what we don't, brings difficulties in this life and impedes actualizing our long-term Dharma goals. Okay. So I remember the first Dharma course I went to, my teacher commented that we are like emotional yo-yos. You know the toy yo-yo? Yeah. So something I like, the yo-yo's up. Oh, but I'm meeting this person I don't like. Oh, somebody get me a present. Oh, somebody criticized me. Oh, I had a good lunch. Oh, I'm sitting in a traffic jam. Oh, my boyfriend said he loves me forever. Oh, now he walked out on me. Yeah. That we're up and down, like just emotional yo-yos all day. And all this emotional flexibility, I don't know, emotional, what's the word, fickleness, yeah. All of this is due to the 8 worldly concerns. Okay? Now, you just used the word fickleness. I don't know in Chinese culture, but in American culture, or European culture, I should say, often they say women are fickle and women are emotional. Do they say that in Chinese culture? Yeah. We're fickle, we can't make up our mind, we're emotional, we're crying all the time. Okay, this is a stereotype that is completely wrong. Okay? I just came from Taiwan. One of my friends there, who's a nun, she started to comment on this and say that stereotype, and I cut her off immediately. You know, this is a stereotype that culture has perpetuated, and it is not true. And I can say this from experience, okay? At our monastery, right now we have many nuns, we have one monk, but we have many male guests, okay? And many men who come thinking maybe to ordain. And let me tell you, the men are just as emotional as the women. Okay? Really, seriously, I am not putting men down and I am not putting women up. I'm just stating the truth. Okay? We recently had a group of men there. They couldn't get along. Really. We had to come and have several meetings with these men, a few nuns at each meeting, to talk with them and teach them how to get along, teach them, nonviolent communication, teach them how to control their temper. And one of the young men said to me afterwards, he was so grateful that we spent this time with him, and he said, always before, he would just get in trouble and people would tell him to leave because of his temper. And he said, but you taught me some skills on how to control my temper. Yeah? So this thing of dividing, giving stereotypes like this, okay. And I've also seen men totally fall apart and sob. Yeah, especially when they're attached to somebody and she leaves. They just fall apart. Yeah? So let's get rid of these old stereotypes because they're very harmful for men and they're very harmful to women. Okay? There's one video called The Masks We Wear. And I really recommend that you see it. It talks about the cultural, how men are conditioned by the culture and how that causes them much pain. Conditioned to be strong, to not show emotion, to never cry. Yeah. And I wasn't there when it happened, but some of the men at the Abbey watched this, and they were moved to watch this video. They were moved to tears by it because they recognized themselves in this kind of conditioning and how difficult it was for them. And similarly, if women are conditioned to just kind of, you can't be aggressive, you can't, or not that aggression isn't good, but you can't express you can't be straightforward. You've always got to be sweet and dainty, you know? And if something displeases you, you can't say, look, what you're doing is wrong. You know, the only thing you can do is cry. Yeah. That's also teaching women that that's how you manage emotions. That's not right either. Okay, so these kind of stereotypes are very, very harmful. Okay? Yeah. And I say it's very interesting for me. Okay, I'm the abbess of a monastery, yeah? Every letter I get from somebody who doesn't know me starts out, "Dear Sir." Because nobody ever thinks that a woman can be the leader of a monastery. It's always, "Dear Sir." Yeah. Even women teaching, many people are shocked. Yeah. But we have just as much intelligence as everybody else. And we should use our intelligence. And not just sit there and say, oh, I've got to be sweet, I've got to be feminine. No, that doesn't help anybody at all. Okay, we should use our talents and abilities to benefit sentient beings. Okay, and we should treat people equal in society too. Yeah. That's what Hillary Clinton, faced in the American elections. Yeah. People look, how can a woman be president? She was much more qualified than she would not start a nuclear war with Korea. Okay? She would not talk in a derogatory way about minority groups. Yeah? And her one famous quote was, "Women's rights are human rights." Yeah? Okay? So this is important, and it fits in with Buddhism. Okay? Now, I know when you go to temples, the monks are in front and the women are like way in the back. Okay? Or the nuns way in the back. Yeah? But Buddha's intention was that everybody attain full awakening. Why did the Buddha come and teach? So that all sentient beings can attain full awakening. So, to go along with what the Buddha said, then we need to encourage all sentient beings. Regardless, men, women, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender or their sexual orientation, regardless of whether they are handicapped or not handicapped. Okay? The Buddha wanted the best for all sentient beings. And as Buddhists, we should support the best for all sentient beings and not discriminate. So yesterday, the topic of the Rohingyas came up. Again, we are Buddhists, and we should say what these people in Myanmar are doing is totally contrary to what the Buddha taught. Okay? But we need to look in our own hearts and check our own discrimination and our own bias and prejudice and overcome that. We may not be able to help the Rohingyas right now, but we can sure help the people who we discriminate against. Okay, so very, very important. Rich, poor, educated, uneducated. Yeah, all sentient beings are the scope of our compassion. Okay. That kind of thing is very important to me. Is it important to you?
Yes.
Yeah? For me, that's very important. Yeah? If I don't work on my own bias and prejudice, and yet claim to be practicing love and compassion, to me that's hypocritical. And one thing I really appreciate about the Buddha Dharma is there's no room for hypocrisy. In other words, in Buddha Dharma, you can act good, you can appear good, but your karma is the real determination of what you do. And karma means our intention. Yeah? So it doesn't matter if we look good to other people. It matters if we have a good intention in our own heart. That's the important thing. Yeah. So we can act wonderful to other people. We know how to do that, don't we? Yeah? We know how to wind people around our little finger. We know how to flatter them so that they'll do what we want. But that's all hypocrisy. That's not genuine kindness. Okay? And the karmic result of our actions correspond with our motivation. So if we're hypocritical, we're creating negative karma, we'll reap the results, the suffering results of negative karma. Yeah? If we are fair and just and don't discriminate, we will, create karma with good motivation, love, compassion, equanimity, and we'll reap good results. Yeah? So it's not what we look like, it's what's going on in here. Okay? And we're all individually responsible for that. Yeah. We can't say, I'm really tired today. I'm so exhausted. Can you do some meditation for me and I'll go to bed? I'll pay you, I pay people to clean my house. I pay people, to work in my business. Can I pay you to meditate for me? And then I'll get the good karma from it? Does that work? No. Okay? So this is something like, it's like eating and sleeping. There's some things we have to do ourselves. Yeah? Although, I think it would be great. Sleeping wastes so much time. I'd much rather pay somebody to sleep, and then I wouldn't have to, and I could, I wouldn't get exhausted at the end of the day. I could stay up all night and do all, That would be great, pay somebody to sleep for you. But it doesn't work that way. Yeah? So similar with Dharma practice, doesn't work that way.
Yeah, on the topic just now on not to be discriminatory, yet on the one hand, we choose to make decisions like which friends we want to mix with. How does that, because sometimes I definitely find myself being quite selective, like how frequent I want to meet certain groups of friends. And then how about family members or relatives who are aged or mentally ill? Like definitely it is quite tiring. So how do I balance between own sort of mixing around with wiser people versus,
Yeah, very good question. Okay, so we want to choose our friends carefully, and so look for people who have good ethical conduct, who have the same values as you do, who are cultivating non-discrimination and love and compassion. So select your friends with care. But in terms of our general feeling towards sentient beings, we want to have equal care and concern and respect for all of them, simply because they're sentient beings. Okay? So no matter how they act, no matter whether they help us or harm us, agree with us or disagree with us, we have a sense of respect because they are a living being with the Buddha nature. Okay? But we relate to people differently according to different social roles. You know, if you know somebody, you might invite them to stay in your home. If you don't know them, you don't invite them to stay in your home. Okay? But in terms of your wish for them to have happiness and its causes, there's no difference in that. Okay? And especially, you know, relatives, you know, like your aunt who complains all the time, you know, who tells you the same story over and over and over again. Do you have any relatives like that? Yeah, same story. Now, I know none of you do that. Yeah, none of you have a story that you tell over and over and over again, even to the people who've heard. But you know, these relatives we have that are so disagreeable, yeah, they do like that, yeah? So they start on telling you the story and you really want to scream, "Be quiet, I've heard it before." But our own story, we love telling that one again and again and again and again, don't we? Okay? So we can learn something from these relatives that tell us the same story again and again. And it's like, this is how other people react to me when I lament and complain to them about the same thing again and again. This person is showing me what I look like when I do that. Yeah. You go into the hospital to see your uncle or your grandfather or somebody who's very sick, and they look awful, they smell awful, and you think, this is what I'm going to look like when I get old, if I live that long. Yeah? Right now, I'm a little bit arrogant because I'm young and healthy. But soon enough, I'm going to look like that. Yeah? And I'll want people to respect me when I am incapacitated and sick, or even with dementia. I want people to respect me, so I've got to respect these people. And I'll give you a clue. People with dementia, don't argue with them. Don't tell them that what they're seeing isn't the way things are. Just go along with it, and you'll have a great discussion. Really, I'll tell you. My father, one time, how old was he then? Maybe 90 or 91. And he was in the hospital. Something had happened. He fell or whatever. And I went to visit him. And my father had some kind of Alzheimer's, not the real severe kind, but enough so that, so funny. Well, it's not funny, but enough Alzheimer's that when he went into the bank, all the tellers ran away. Because whenever he got the bank statements, my father lived in California, the bank statements were mailed from Florida, which was clear across the country. And he would go, "Why did they move my money from Florida? I live in California. Why did they take my money to Florida? I want my money to be in California." And he'd want to go to the bank and ask the tellers, where's my money? I want to see it. Why'd you take it to Florida? So the bank tellers, they just all scattered when Dad walked in because, as much as we told him, no, that's just where the bank headquarters are. Your money is here. You can get it anytime you want. He was so afraid that he couldn't, that his money was in Florida. Okay, so this was the kind of dementia he had. So he was ill in the hospital, and he said something to me like, when you're in New York and you want to go to the country called London, what do you need to take with you? It's like, Dad, you're near Los Angeles. Are you planning on going to New York or London? And then I realized what he was doing. He kept saying, what do I take with me? What do I leave behind? And I realized what he was talking about. He was talking about analogies for when you die. Because he said, when I cross the ocean to go to London, when you die and you go from one life to the next, what do you need to take with you? And what do you leave behind? His dementia, he was talking in analogies, allegories like this. So I just joined in the discussion. And I said, when you go from New York to London, when you cross that ocean, your kind heart is the best thing to take with you. Yeah. You leave all your problems behind. They're not going to come with. You take your compassion. You take your kindness. You take all your virtuous actions with you when you go across the ocean. And we had this discussion, all in symbols. Okay? So it's just a tip. When, if you have a relative with dementia, try and understand what it is they're really trying to say. Yeah? Like my dad with, the money's in Florida, why isn't it in California? What he's really trying to say is, am I secure? Yeah? Is there going to be enough money to take care of me in my old age? Yeah. And so we kids, if we had been smart, we would have said, oh, Dad, it doesn't matter where your money is. There's enough, here, right now, to take care of you. You don't need to worry about getting old. Yeah? So it's very good. Try and tune in to what they're really asking. Yeah? And sometimes, okay, this will prevent you from telling little white lies, okay? Your relative who is young and sane, okay, no dementia, yeah, okay. But they're young, they're okay. Your relative invites you over to dinner. They serve you exactly the kind of food you can't stand. Okay? And you're sitting there eating it. And they say, how do you like the food? Then what do you say?
Nice.
If you say nice, that's not true, is it? If you say it stinks, that's not very polite. But what are they really asking when they say, how do you like the food? What is it they really want to know?
You want some more?
What are they really asking? Huh? Aren't they saying, I did something, I cooked this meal to show my affection for you. Are you receiving my affection? Yeah, that's what they're really asking, isn't it, when they say, how do you like the food? They're saying, you know, I care about you. Do you get that? Do you care about me back? So when they say, how do you like the food? You say, you know, you really spent a long time preparing this food or going out to get it, whatever it is. And I really appreciate your inviting me over to dinner, and I'm really enjoying spending the time with you. Thank you so much. So you're not commenting on the food, because actually the food is not the issue. And you're really telling them from your heart that you appreciate spending time with them. And that's what they really want to know. Okay?
So that's not hiding the truth.
No. No. In fact, I think that's more telling the truth than anything else, because that's the real question they're asking. Yeah. Lots of times people say things, but they are asking something else, or they're actually saying something else. And we have to develop a sensitivity to what is it they're actually trying to say. Yeah, and then address that issue. Yeah. Somebody came complaining to me a couple of weeks ago. Oh, so-and-so gets to do this, and I don't get to do that, and they think they're special, and, you know, I don't think we should have special people around here. And yeah, I'm jealous, but, you know, that's because of the situation. You know, so this person is a Dharma practitioner. Yeah, they're a Dharma practitioner. And they had asked me, please, you know, they had asked me prior, please give them honest feedback. And so I listened to them, and I didn't say much. And then the next day I wrote and I said, you know, you were really jealous and unhappy with somebody else's behavior. What is it you're really trying to say? What is it that you're really needing? Because I knew, you know, that somebody else getting a few small privileges that this person didn't have, that's not the real issue. The real issue is some kind of dissatisfaction in that person themselves. So because they're a Dharma practitioner, I could ask them, what is it you're really feeling? What is it you're really needing? What is it you're really trying to say? And they wrote back and they said, thank you for that advice. Yeah. Okay, so often we need to see, what is it? Yeah. When I was a teenager and I was not getting along with my parents, they wanted me to be home at a certain time, and all my friends got to stay out later, and why do I have to be home at this time? And you know. And we were not getting along at all. Okay? Yeah. What was my concern? What was I really trying to say by, all my friends don't have to be home so early, why do I have to be? No, that's not the real issue. What? The real issue for me was my autonomy. Yeah? I wanted to be autonomous and make my own decisions. What was the issue for my parents in wanting me to be home? Safety. They were fighting about safety. I was fighting about autonomy. No wonder we were quarreling. If they had been able to acknowledge my wish for autonomy. And if I had been able to acknowledge their wish for my safety, we could have negotiated something. Okay? So that's why when we're not clear about really what somebody is wanting, because I thought my parents were trying to control me. I didn't realize they were concerned with my safety. My parents thought I was being a reckless individual. I just was saying, I want some autonomy to make my own decision. So we missed what each other was actually trying to say. And also, each of us was not really saying what the main issue was for us. Okay? So that's why we need to listen closely. And what's this person really trying to say? What's going on here?